Hello, in this presentation we will compare QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop. Hello, in this presentation we will create, analyze, and export to Excel a comparative balance sheet within QuickBooks Online. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are in the QuickBooks Online dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. We're going to be looking at a specific balance sheet at this point. We're going to be looking at a comparative balance sheet, one that compares one period to another, in our case, 1 month to another, that month of January and February. In order to do that, we're going to go to the reports down here on the left side. And within the reports section, we should have the balance sheet selected in the frequently run reports. But if it's not there, we can then type in to the search engine balance sheet. So we'll type in balance sheet. It should auto-populate. That's the one we want. Within the balance sheet, we're going to change the date range to the 2-month time period. And that's going to be 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. This, once again, that being January 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021. This, once again, is what the data will look like after we enter the information. So if you're following along with this problem, you have no data at this point. We're just looking at these financial statements here. We're going to show some of the options in terms of what the end product will look like and how to process these reports as we do so. Then we'll enter the data. Then we'll get to these reports again, and we'll print these reports and be looking at them as we go through them. So once we have the date range here, we're going to say run that report. And here is the report that is run. Note once again that the report is as of February 28th, 2021. One date, one time, one point in time. That is the nature of a balance sheet. We do have the date range. There's a couple different things the date range will do. One good thing about a date range is it allows us to be able to auto zoom on information and see a range of data from the transaction or general ledger type report. And it also has some functionality when we start to look at the different display options. So in this case, we have the balance sheet. This is a standard balance sheet here, just one time period, but we often want to have more than one time period. We might want to have, in this case, 2 months. We might want to have the month of January and February. Now, if we were looking at a profit and loss or income statement type of statement, when we run this month of January and February, it would then combine the numbers. We would see income for a 2-month time period. But the balance sheet only shows as of the end of the month. So when we change something for a comparison, we're really talking about what we would like to see is a report as of the end of January and a report as of the end of February. The easiest way to do that is to just select in this icon here, we've got the total column. If we select and go through here and go to the months and run that, so we have the months, we have the date range, which runs a 2-month time period, then we're going to go ahead and run that report. And if we run that report, it will then break out the ends of the 2 months. So that might seem a little bit odd at first on why exactly that works or how that works. QuickBooks is seeing a 2-month time period. QuickBooks is saying, hey, you know what, I only need to show what is as of the end of the month because this is a point in time. And therefore, if we select a 2-month time period and then say, I want to show months instead of the total amounts, it's going to then say, well, we must mean then the point in time as of the end of January and then the point in time as of the end of February. And that's how it's going to draw out this report. So we need to have some understanding of, what's a balance sheet? What is it, a point in time or is it a time frame? And then think about what the range of dates is going to do, as well as choosing some of these options, such as comparing it to months. Now, if we select this item, and we can use some of these other things, of course, weeks would be a similar item. We've looked at some of those options before, so I won't go through them all here, but it's going to be the similar kind of format. We'll select the range, and it'll select the end point of any range we look at, whether it be month, year, week. Now, when we do this, it's interesting that we have the January and then February, meaning it goes from left to right in order of the oldest month first and then goes to newer months later. When we run some other types of comparison reports, as we'll see later, it'll actually put the new month up front. So we want to be careful whenever you're reading a report. You want to be looking at it and say, well, what are we working with here? Did they put the most current month up front, meaning in this case it would be February? which would make sense because often that's the most important month to us, is the current month that we're looking at. Or do we put the oldest month up front, which would also make sense because then we would be reading from left to right, oldest to newest, which would be a natural form of looking at a progression. So in this format, the way we're working it here, we see it that it goes left to right in order of progression, in order of time, January, and then February. If we go through this, of course, we have the balance sheet accounts, and we're going to have the balance sheet accounts are always going to be in order: assets, then liabilities, then equity, then income and expenses. We're starting off with the assets in terms of the cash account, comparing January and February, then accounts receivable, January and February, other current assets, January and February, fixed assets, then the total fixed, and then total assets down below. So we can compare the totals of the two. Then, of course, we have the liabilities and equity, starting with the accounts payable, and then the Visa card, other current liabilities, and long-term liabilities, total liabilities. Then we have the equity section that we compare out the liabilities, and the equity gives us total liabilities and equity, which will be equivalent to the assets of this report as well. The one other thing we're going to do just for formatting's sake is we're going to remove the date and time down here. So in order to do that, we're going to scroll back up to the top, and we're going to go to the Customize section, and then we're going to go to Header and Footer, and we're going to select that triangle to see the drop down, and we're going to remove the date prepared, time prepared, and report basis, and that's going to be it. Then we'll run that report. And that'll give us this information. If we scroll back down, we're going to have this same information, and we have removed this down here. Now note that as we look at this two months, obviously January, when we work this problem, will be our first month of operation. February will be our second month. So February should be a more standard month, and January should be substantially different, considering it would be the first month of operations. As a business starts, it will have substantially different points in time, and at some point you would think that it would then level out and have more consistency over time. And so we're going to go ahead and export this report now. So we're going to export it to Excel, practicing that process. In order to export, all we do is select this icon here, and we're going to go to Export. So we will export, and it should open up Excel automatically and export this information to it. Note that if you have worked with the desktop version, it's a little bit different in the exporting process, where we can choose a sheet and pick if we want an existing sheet or not. This one's a bit quicker to do that, but we don't have a little less functionality. We're going to enable the editing up here. It's also nice that we have the title up top, but it is merging a cell. So when we format these, we'll have to adjust the fact that we have this merged cell, meaning Home tab, alignment, merged cell. This A1 cell is really A1, B1, and C1, or C2, A2, C2, and B2. And if we start to manipulate this report, it could kind of have some problems. But note that once we have this information, we could do stuff like we could, subtract these two out if we wanted to. And we can run similar reports like this in QuickBooks, and we can start manipulating the data here. And so that's one of the main uses, one of the great benefits of having any kind of database program, be able to export to Excel and having the functionality on our end to be able to manipulate the data in pretty basic ways, just sorting the data and doing some just plus, minus, and sum function calculations. We're going to go ahead and save this now. It looks like it is printing the way we would like to see it, meaning it's all going to fit on one page wide, and if it's more than one page long, that's okay with me. I just like to make sure it's on one page wide. So we're going to go to the File tab, we're going to scroll down, and we're going to Save As. Then we're going to browse to the location where we would like to save this as to. I'm going to put it into this Excel Docs 1 here. We're going to put it into Excel Docs 1. And I'm going to change the name to, let's make it, I'm going to actually delete the whole thing and just call it Comparative Balance Sheet. Comparative Balance Sheet. I'm going to save that here. Now note, I might want to put that even here, Comparative Balance Sheet. And I could change that in Excel here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Comparative Balance Sheet. That's one of the things we can do in Excel, although we can do that in QuickBooks as well. I'm going to go and save this item. We're going to close this, and we'll do the same thing here. I'm going to change this. Instead of just a balance sheet, we'll make it a comparative balance sheet. So we're going to go ahead and scroll back up to the Customize and scroll back down, and we'll change just from this balance sheet, we'll just put a comparative in front of it. Comparative, and run that report. And that'll give us a bit more customized name here. I changed it one more time. It's comparative balance sheet. So if we scroll back up there again, if we go to Customize and we scroll down to the header and footer section, this triangle should be open. Then we type in here comparative balance sheet and then run that report. And then we'll have that comparative balance sheet, and we will be able to see that title change. And that could be important when we run different types of reports, different types of comparison reports such as this. Hello, in this presentation we will create a comparative balance sheet within QuickBooks Pro 2018. If you've been following along with us, we will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. If not, that's okay. We will be generating a comparative balance sheet. If you have the backup file, you can go to the File tab and restore that backup file. We currently have the Open Windows list open, which can be found at the View and Open Windows. And we currently have the home page open, that found at the Company and Home page. We will be recording a balance sheet now, or creating a balance sheet and a comparative balance sheet at that, by selecting the Reports drop down up top. We're going to go to Company and Financial and scroll down to the Balance Sheet. The balance sheet itself will be the starting point that we're going to use in order to create the comparative balance sheet. We are then going to change the date to 12/31/21, the period that we want to be working in, December 31st, 2021. We're then going to go to the Customize report up top. And we're going to go through some of these options. Now, we only have the one date here, note, because it is as of a specific point in time. But in order to make the comparative balance sheet, we're going to change this to the range. And I'm actually going to make it the range of 01/01/21. And we're just going to make it 2 months. I want to compare just 2 months. And that's going to be to 02/28/21. So January 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021. We're going to have the accrual basis, and then we're going to have the display columns. And all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change this to change it to a month. And that's going to say, QuickBooks, we want you to take these 2 time periods and just split them and just show them at the month end, meaning show me the January 31st month end and the February 28th month end. So that's going to be that split as here. I'm going to say okay, and then we'll go back and see some other changes we'll make before we print this report. So here's that information, the January and the February. We're going to go back to Customize Report. And then if we go through some of these other options, we're just going to go to the Filter option. We're going to keep that standard. We're going to go to the Header and Footer. And I'm going to get in the practice of removing these time and date stamps. So we're going to go ahead and take away the date prepared just to get used to doing those items. We might want to put a name in the footer. So we might want to get in the practice of doing that. So when we print this out, we'll have that there. So those are some normal things that we could add here. Now in this case, we may want to not just call it the balance sheet because it's a comparative balance sheet. So this might want to change the actual report title to a comparative balance sheet. And that's going to change the name here. We'll keep the alignments the same, and the fonts we're going to keep the same here. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay. And there we have it. So now we have a comparative balance sheet to be in the title. And we've memorized we've saved that, we've changed that title. And now we can look through this report and we have that nice comparison from January and February. We will go ahead now and export this report. So we're going to export this report to the same location that we exported a balance sheet to. So we're going to export it to an Excel sheet that's been created prior to this. So we're going to go to the Excel up top, create a new worksheet. It's kind of interesting that QuickBooks gives us this option first, because you would think it would be you choose the workbook first, meaning what actual Excel file do you want. But we're going to put the worksheet within the workbook first, and then we're going to choose the fact that we want an existing workbook. Locate where that workbook is, the actual Excel file, by selecting Browse. And we can go to the drop down. I'm going to go here. Mine is in section 2. And I want this section 2 reports we started making. I can click on that and say open, or just double click on it as I typically do. And then we are going to export that information. It should then open up Excel, create a new tab within Excel, export this information to that new tab within Excel, and we're going to do the customize options, the normal things we typically do once we export this report. One being that I'm going to drag this cell to the right because I want it in order. This is one we made last time. I want this to the right of it. I'm just going to grab it and drag it to the right. We're going to rename it, and I'm just going to call it Comparative Balance Sheet. I'm going to start abbreviating because we don't have too much space there in terms of the name. And there's going to be that. I typically then go to the View tab up top, Windows Group, remove the split screen. And then I like to look at the page layout view to see how it might print, and also to see the header on it. So that's this little box over here, page layout view. We see the header is here, and it looks like it's going to print on one column wide. That's good. Back to the normal view. Going to go ahead and save this like so, and say yes, and close this out, and there's the comparative balance sheet.